Catherine Kirkendall, who's the executive director of the U.S. office of the Hagar International, which is an international nonprofit organization that works globally with survivors of exploitation, including trafficking in persons. One of the emerging issues which are now seeing, as we've talked in some of the interventions earlier today, is the trafficking for the purpose of exploitation in forced criminality and organized crime models that use human trafficking victims to conduct online scams and other crime. And as an organization, new organization that works with survivors of trafficking globally, including in Southeast Asia, where this issue of scam centers is particularly prevalent, how do you actually see this form of trafficking carrying out in practice? And again, looking ahead, since this is an issue which will be considered in the global plan of action as like one of the new emerging issues, what are some of the key considerations that could be considered in tackling this kind of relatively new forms of trafficking? Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, co-facilitators, and stakeholders. It's an honor to join you today on behalf of Hagar International, as you said, a global NGO supporting traffickers or survivors of trafficking, slavery, and abuse across 7 country states. We represent 300 million individuals, and we walk with survivors not just at the point of rescue, but through the long, individualized journey of healing, justice, and reintegration. You asked how this form of trafficking is carried out. We are witnessing the fast-growing crisis of trafficking for forced criminality, especially in cyber scam operations. It targets the vulnerable, enriches organized crime, and leaves thousands of survivors unrecognized and criminalized. Traffickers are recruiting victims under false pretenses. They post fake jobs on legitimate websites for tech and customer service roles. There's also romantic lures on social media and dating apps. Many persons are lured across borders, their documents confiscated, and trapped in heavily guarded compounds. Inside, they're forced to conduct online fraud, romance scams, crypto investment schemes, phishing operations. You've probably received text messages from these individuals yourselves. They're given quotas, they're forced to use manipulation tactics, and they're punished if they fail. Many are beaten, starved, or sold to other compounds. But just as many are trafficked without physical chains. They're coerced through online threats, blackmail, manipulation, forced to scam others from their own home, under constant fear and control. Let me give you a few faces to this. A former Hagar client was lured online by a romance scam, blackmailed into scamming others from their own home. And these invisible chains are no less binding. There's also a teenage girl that we supported. She was promised a job in data entry and instead was trafficked into Cambodia, forced to impersonate a romantic partner online, scamming victims into fake investments. Her captors told her that her safety depended on her numbers. And another young man we met was lured across the border by a great IT job. There, he was locked in a compound, physically abused when he missed his quota. And when he escaped, he was more terrified that he'd be arrested for the crimes he was forced to commit. And finally, a 17-year-old trafficked from Thailand into Cambodia, forced to make scam calls all day long. She was told if she disobeyed, she'd be sold again and again. And it was only through cross-border coordination from our organizations that she was freed and her traffickers prosecuted. At Hagar, our teams work together across the countries to facilitate this repatriation. But they're not isolated cases. We estimate that up to 80% of text message scam operations involve trafficking victims. That's 80%. Before I speak to the solutions, I want to share our motivation. Hagar is named after the first woman recorded to name God. She called him El Roy, the God who sees me. This story shapes our mandate to see clearly every survivor and walk with them as they reclaim what trafficking tried to erase, their dignity, justice, and individual restoration. Now, you ask, what are the key considerations for the global plan of action? First and foremost, recognition. Trafficking for forced criminality including scam operations, is already covered under the Palermo Protocol. We don't need a new definition. We need governments to understand it, to recognize it in practice, and ensure that survivors are not prosecuted for crimes they were coerced to commit. And that brings us to number 2, protection. We've addressed it, but the non-punishment principle has to move from paper to practice, inside courts and in policy and in policing. Survivors must not be re-victimized by the systems that are meant to protect them. And third, we need disruption. To dismantle these trafficking networks, we have to address what enables them. Under-regulated tech platforms, anonymous financial flows, and protected economic zones. This requires stronger cross-border cooperation through shared intelligence, joint investigations, and consistent victim screening using the national referral mechanisms. Without a coordinated effort and coordinated enforcement, none of these solutions will take root. At Hagar, we see every survivor as a girl, a boy, a sister, an individual. We see dignity, worth, and hope. Here today, let this be the moment that we all evolve together and align our systems with the realities of this crime, so that survivors are each seen, protected, and restored, not in isolation, but through collective, coordinated action. Thank you.